start today's lesson. We are going to start a series of lectures on database implementation. This is basically going to be on some practicals as well at the end. So you need to set up your environment as well. I will guide you how to do it. Before that, I think you have some of the previous experience regarding databases. So before we start, we better go through some refreshing of previous knowledge. So I would like to give you these 4 review questions just to refresh what you have learned previously, and then after we will little by little move into the required knowledge to complete this course module. So first you can take this into your notebooks and try to answer. Then I'll give you several minutes, then we can discuss. With that knowledge, we can step into our new lesson called database implementation. What is actually data? And you can come up with some real world examples. I think there are plenty of examples. So what do you mean by data? You can tell me what you have wrote actually. Then we can make a better discussion and we can understand the content. So how do you explain data, and what you can, meanwhile you can think how data is different from information as well. So before that, you have to understand what is data, what you have written, what is the answer for this. So let's make this an interactive discussions, therefore you can learn together. And as well as since at the end of actually not at the end, at the middle of this series of lectures, you will be doing hands-on practicals. Therefore you should learn the concepts and things before you go to practicals. That is the important thing, because otherwise since I'm doing this with Oracle, it's totally, I hope it's totally new one to you, so you need to familiar with the environment as well as the commands and the way of interacting with text editors. Many things you can you have to learn from the beginning. Therefore at that time we have be familiar with the concepts very well. Therefore, what would be the answer for the first question? What is data, and what are the real world examples you can find?
Data is raw facts and figures. As example, we can use any real world thing we can see and we can touch, or anything we can use as a data.
Actually, data is a collection of things. What you told is not correct, the raw thing. Now, for an example, how do you collect your, let's say you want to make a t-shirt for your batch. So how do you collect data? Then it would be a typical example which results in a sample data set, right? So what are the things you consider there when you do when you want to prepare a batch t-shirt? Then what data you collect?
The person who want to get the t-shirt and sizes, price, qualities.
Yeah, basically you have to prepare a list actually, right? With that list you may definitely need the name of the student and their sizes. If it is predefined sizes, you have to tell them, for an example, medium, large, XL, likewise. If you want to really make a customized one, then you may need to get the chest size, and you may need to get some average details, right? Not only the standard sizes. Therefore, you need to collect those things, and the preferred color or the design, whatever it is, you have to collect. Then how many t-shirts he or she want, right? Then you can collect that fact as well. In the same way, if you want to go for a batch trip, then you may collect some different set of data, right? But with once you collected that data, you can prepare something called database. So what are the databases actually? What is the answer you have written for the second question? So what is a database then? What are the answers you have written?
Database is a large collection of data.
Yeah, in simple, that is a large collection of data. How you collect data is different from different databases, right? For an example, you think, I hope you know something called data abstraction. In databases, we do not collect all the data, right? We first have to identify what are the relevant data to be stored in our database, right? Now, if I give you one example, now you assume, anyhow, you have registered into our University of Vocational Technology, right? When you register to the university, definitely you must have filled a form with your details, right? In that case, you might have filled some general data like your name, age, and address, and so on. Those are some general data. But there are some specific data like your educational qualifications, right? And basically the NVQ level, and if you have any industrial training experience as well, it can also be accounted, right? But none of us have asked you regarding your most preferred food, right? Food habit or way of dressing normally. It has to be in a normal accepted attire. But apart from that, in that form, there was nothing asked like that, right? The food habits and so on. Now you assume the same you get some illness, and due to that you want to admit for a hospital, right? The important thing is the same you. Then they will also ask you some details for you to be registered on their system, right? Therefore, would they ask your educational qualification at there? You can definitely give your general details like name, age, and those things, but would they ask your educational qualifications to be admitted or registered into a hospital? So you can interactively talk with me, then you get to know about this thing very well with real world example. Did anybody ask you regarding your educational qualifications? Does it matter there? Do we need for a patient to be admitted? Does he or she need some educational qualification?
No.
Yes. Now you are clear, but the doctor would ask about your food habits, right? Definitely, because since your illness has to be diagnosed, he may ask your food habits, what you eaten during 24 hours, or eaten or have drunk some thing within 24 hours or past week, whatever it is. But it matters there. So now you think two different systems, but same you is modeled using different set of data, we never want to get all the details in all the systems, right? Therefore, we have to be specific to the context we are working when we prepare a database. So we get only relevant data for a particular database. In that case, we select what we call the entities, then their attributes has to be carefully selected. So we then call it an abstraction, because we only take subset of all the data. We need only subset. Therefore, you can typically find some databases. Do you have any examples related to databases? Give me a typical example. Information technology, there are many databases. What are the databases you found in your day-to-day life?
MySQL.
Okay, it's a software actually where it provides you facilities to prepare database. But if you take a telephone directory, right, it's a typical example of a database. But there are problems of accessing, and since it is in the form of what is the not in the software, but it's a hardbound document. Anyhow, it is also having some data related to a particular context, right? What you can find is the details of people and some organizations. It's a example of non-IT context. What you call like database management systems, like MySQL, there can be many more like DB2, Oracle, Microsoft SQL, and likewise. So those are software tools which facilitates to implement databases. Right. What is a relational database, and why actually it is important to have relational databases?
Relational databases contains tables and data arranging in tables manner.
Right. Actually, all the databases in tables. That is how we prepare databases. Basically, very all databases had only tables, but there was no relationship in between. If you take an example, in today's databases, we may prepare tables with relations. I think you are familiar with somewhat ER diagrams. In ER diagrams, we model the database before you do the actual implementation. Right? In that, you identify the tables and you normalize the ER diagram. Finally, you come up with a schema. With schema, you can implement using a relevant database management system. In there, what we do is, I think you know, when we register students, there can be one table for student details. But once they are registered, you gradually complete your course modules. Then your marks and other relevant things can be stored in another table with your student ID. And your personal detail table should also have the same ID, and marks table should have the same ID. With that, we refer a mark of a particular student, right? Even though those details are in two different tables, we can link or join with that student ID. And we join and we get the rest of the details which is pertaining to a particular student. For an example, if you say the student ID 1002, so you can get the name, address, and relevant content from the table 1, student table, and then you can get the related subjects and the marks which he has completed from the subject or marks table. Right? Likewise, we can build up relational connections. So with that, we can retrieve related information out of the tables. That can only be possible with relational databases. Anyhow, today's databases are almost all databases are relational databases. Otherwise, it won't be any use. But still, you can prepare non-relational database. Even the database management systems support relational databases. Because if you take an example, in your database, if you do not create any relationships among tables, then those tables are isolated to each other. Okay? Then there's no relation. Okay? Therefore, it will be useless then after. Right? What is the answer for the fourth one? How do you make information from a relational database? Actually, I have already explained you, but what you have written is can also be discussed.
We can make information with relationship with the tables and normalization.
Actually, the normalization comes before we implement the database. Have you done ER diagrams in your previous semesters?
Yeah.
Right. Once you have completed your ER diagrams, then you have to do something called normalization. Have you learned on normalization as well?
Yeah.
Right. So the main idea of the normalization is to eliminate redundancies. Right. In databases, we never store the same record in many places. We do not replicate or duplicate the same record in a database. Right? If we do so, you will definitely end up with millions of replicated records. Right? It's a base of our database. Then ultimately our hard drive as well, the capacity is not efficiently utilized. Therefore, we separate different things into different tables and store in separate tables. So if you take all the details in one table, for an example, let's say if you take the population of Sri Lanka, normally many of people are using mobile phones, but it is still compared to the whole population, it is still around 5 million, nearly 5 million. But you feel the field called contact number, if you insert it into a table and you want to get all the citizen details in particular table, so you will end up with around 10.5 million empty blocks or empty spaces in your table, right? If only assuming there are only 5 million people is having mobile phones or telephone contact number. Okay. Or then you can, what you do is you can separate that part into a table. We get only the existing mobile phone numbers. Then you would store only the available things, right? So then you can come up with only 5 million records. There are no duplicates as well as no null values. Therefore, it is very important to do a normalization and break them down into separate tables. So when you make information, as we discussed, data is only a raw thing. Out of that, you can combine tables together using joins and having the key utilization, and you have to use the key to refer into several tables, and then you can get information, not only just data, related information from the databases. Right? I think it is clear to you. If you have any questions, you can ask, and then after we can go to the next section. This is a sample database. As I told you, it's having a table, and it is having only the data related to this particular title called complaints on visa. So these are the set of complaints related to different categories. And the number of complaints are listed. This is a simple database where you can encounter in our real world life. Okay. Now we just discuss in detail what is data. As we already discussed, data is a collection of facts such as values or measurement. For an example, as I already told you, names of students in a class where you want to prepare a t-shirt, or where you want to go on a batch trip, then you may have a list of names of students in your class, and for another reason you may get their age as well and their native places, and likewise you can collect many data related to particular context. Always you have to remember the data are collected depending on the context. That is why I give you a scenario like the same you being registered into the University of Vocational Technology as well as to a hospital. Right? Two different systems register you in different manners because it is depending on the context. So the data can be numbers, words, measurements, observation, descriptions, and many more things like. I think it is clear to you. When you talk about data, we have already talked about the basics of data, but there are two important things to be considered. The data can be organized or unorganized. Right? Can you give me an example for an organized data as well as unorganized data? What are the examples you can find? What are the examples for unorganized data and organized data?
As unorganized data, we can collect 10 names of people. As organized, we can separate them with first name and last name and organize with alphabetical order.
Right. It's actually a typical example. So if you move into unorganized data, now you think if your record room is like this in your school, can you ask your birth certificate or whatever your personal file after 13 years of your school period, and when you want to leave your school, you can get asked for your birth certificate and so on. then would it be possible if your school's record room is like this? So what are the difficulties having unorganized data? That's why I gave this example. If you collect data and they are in an unorganized manner, then you definitely encounter many problems. So what are the problems you encounter if your data is unorganized?
Hard to process.
Process in the sense you can a bit explain that.
To find what we want to find.
Yeah, that is one example. What we require cannot be easily found. It's one thing. So the extract the information out of that is also difficult. Right? Only we can do is we can always easily insert some data. Right? We do not need to worry about the order and the actual place. You can just insert your data, right? But when you retrieve, it will be very difficult for you to retrieve certain data which you are interested in. So it makes a lot more time for you to retrieve data. You have to find and retrieve data, right? Access to data is very time consuming. And the other problem is you may not know whether the particular thing is there, right? Now, looking at this particular figure, the image, you may not assure that whether your file is there even, right? It can be misplaced. So, but even still we do not know our required thing is there. But not knowing, we can waste days or weeks of time trying to find the file. But ultimately you will end up with nothing, and then only you realize the file is not found. So anyhow, it takes a lot more time and it's a waste of time. Now look at this figure, right? This is a typical example again for organized data. Where can you find this type of data? So this is a real world example. Have you seen this type of things? Bookshelves in any place of the university?
Library.
Yes, library. Do you have to waste weeks or days of time to find a book from the shelves?
No.
How do you, what is the process there? How do you find a particular book?
All books are categorized, so we
Yes.
can find.
Yeah, you can find, but you can check the availability of books. Even if you cannot find, the normally the best way is to ask from the librarian. So then he would tell you that whether the book is available, right? So if it is not available, you should not waste your time on searching. It is the single point of reference, and also there can be many assistants for you to assist. And once the book is there, the books are categorized as you told, then you can go to that particular shelf and find the book you want. So it's a typical example for organized data. Now, feel the difference. In an unorganized data, it is very time consuming. The only easy thing is you do not want to worry about where to insert that data. But in organized data, you should always have a location. Since these books are categorized, when you return these books, the assistants, not by you, most probably the assistants have to search and find the actual place and put that books into that relevant place. It takes a bit time, but it saves a lot for the future. Right. With that, I hope sometimes you may have done these database analysis and design and database programming and database management systems. Have you done these three in previous semesters?
Sir, sometimes we can't hear you. Maybe a connection problem or something.
Can you hear me now? I think.
Yeah, now can hear.
Have you done these three things in your previous semesters?
Yes, sir, we need study.
It's actually a prerequisite for this particular subject. So I hope even if you are not refreshed your knowledge on these things, but little by little you better refresh, because these things would be needed in this module. Right? That's why you normally complete them in advance. So with that, what we discussed, you quickly take this exercise into your notebooks and we do the same process. I'll give you some time and then you can come up with your answers. Then we can discuss and we can then move to the next section. Likewise, we have to climb up the ladder little by little, getting to know about this database implementation. And with this experience you have, I hope you have SQL experience, but here we try to learn about PLSQL, which is normally only run by the Oracle PLSQL engine. Therefore, you have to be a little bit familiar with the PLSQL, but the basic concept would be much similar to SQL. Therefore, based on that, you can build your knowledge on PLSQL. Right. So I'll give you some time. Then, what would be the answer for the first question? What are the difference between data and information?
Data is a raw data, unprocessed in data. Information is processed data. Data, it's not used for taking decisions or anything. Information is used to take decisions.
Right. So can you give me just a little example how you derive information from data, out of data? A small typical example.
Our class students' marks for a subject is a data. If we calculate the total average rank grade or something, that's the information we process.
Right. Then, yeah. Then actually good. So you can just collect some data as in your real situation. If you take the same example where we wanted to prepare a t-shirt for your badge, then you would have collected different chest sizes, breast size and collar size, and likewise. But when you get certain details of many students, you can't always customize them to each individual student. Therefore, you should definitely take some average levels, falls into different categories like small, medium, large, XL. Even you want more than that, you can go for double XL. right? So then you can find it is more descriptive. Actually, in your example as well, just looking at the marks, it is not descriptive that much, but when you calculate the total average, likewise, then you can come up with some idea how different students have scored, and you can get the semester average to get some idea about how students have scored and passed, how many students have passed the semester subjects, and how many of they are going to be graduated in a particular year. Something like that can be observed, and they can make certain decisions on that. Therefore, it's a typical example where we can derive information out of data. If you check another example, like we can daily monitor the rainfall in millimeters, and they can collect them for several years and prepare certain order, and they can then forecast some information, and they can announce the general public regarding the seasonal behavior of rainfall or the climatic differences, changes in different throughout the year. Then after, those information can be utilized by many different people, right? Now, if you take that weather forecast, how that different information is used by different people, do you have any idea? If you take farmers, how can they use weather forecast in their day-to-day activities? And then how can the fishermen utilize the same data in to take their decisions, right? Can somebody tell you idea on this regard? Don't you have any idea how the weather forecast can be? Now let's assume the weather forecast is giving you some information. So as a farmer, how those information is used to take decisions, and as fishermen, how can you use the same information to take decision? And if you talk about something more, how students like you or general public can benefit from the same information. You can.
Fishermen use the detail to calculate the sea waves at the rain days, and farmers to check the water to their farms, and public people used to do their day-to-day activities when raining. They can take decisions.
Right. If you talk little bit in detail, actually the fishermen can take decision. First decision is whether to go for their work or not, right? It can be a main decision, right? We have previous very sad experience regarding the things happen to fishermen. So basically they can do that types of things to avoid they are getting hurted, and it's a very sad situation. And apart from that, if you take the farmers, they can decide what type of seeds they can cultivate during the seasons, right? Some seeds may need water, some may need periodic periods of intervals where water is needed and not needed. Likewise, they can decide on the type of seeds they want to cultivate. Then they can decide on how they crop the cultivation, as well as their market also depends on some situation. For an example, something like the king that would not be suitable for rainy days. People may not drink king coconut in rainy days. It's a general thing. So in dry seasons, king coconut price normally goes high, but in between they can decide on such things. For general public, they can decide very small things like whether to bring an umbrella or not. It's a decision based on actually can be based on weather forecast. If it is really true, then we can avoid taking umbrella if it is not a rainy day, right? Apart from that, they can plan their events, outdoor events, and school-going children also can decide on how they are going to participate for sport meets, and a lot more things likewise. Therefore, the same information you have to understand is the same information, same what is broadcasted by the Weather Forecast Corporation. We are taking different parties taking different decisions, right? Therefore, decision is based on the context as well as different people, but information, the value of information is very high. The same information led to take many different decisions for many different people. That is the most important thing. I think I have already discussed about the second one, but you can still discuss advantages of organized data or unorganized data. You should point it out, since I have already discussed what you have written there.
Easy to access, less storage facilities is enough.
Okay, easy to access. The organized data is easy to access, and if it is well organized, then we can have the minimum storage to store such data, and you can save a lot more time, and you can create more descriptive information out of organized data. Right. The third one I have already discussed. The typical example, as you also told, the list of student details as well as their marks, telephone directory. It's again one example. Anyhow, we have to keep in mind that it always have to be collected for a specific thing. As I explained in the University of Vocational Database and Hospital System Database, two different systems store two different data. In first case, the university treats you like an undergraduate, so they need certain data, and hospital is going to treat you as a patient, therefore they are treating you as a patient, so they collect data in thinking of you as a patient. So, two different systems models you in two different manners using abstract data, right? In data for one database is maybe actually not relevant to other database because due to different context, right? Then what is the fourth one? What is a DBMS?
DBMS is software, the database management system.
Right, now we have database as well as database management system. We need those two. Those two are actually different two components. So do you have any idea why we need, we already have a database as well as why we need database management system?
We need database management system to define, manipulate, and manage data in database.
Yes, actually, database alone is a collection of data. Having only the data, you should not be able to extract the useful information out of database. To facilitate that, we have to have database management system where it caters for you to query and get required data in the database. So you have data dictionary, data manipulation language like SQL. So those are provided by database management system. So without that, you are not able to get data. Now, as humans, we talk with each other and retrieve relevant facts and information. But to interact with the database, we have to have some mechanism. Those mechanisms are catered by database management system.
Database system is an integrated collection of related files and tables, definitions.
Yes, right. It's a collection as you working as a system. That is why we call it as a system. Therefore, in different occasions, we use database systems. And if you go to question number 6, what are the advantages? These are direct answers actually. Even you can refer the internet and get the answers, but the important thing when we do these type of exercises, you should not just extract the same thing and copy to as your answers. You have to first understand there are plenty of resources in the internet. First you read them and understand, and you can explain or write your own answer. Then you won't forget that thing. That is the important thing. If you just copied and pasted, then definitely you forget these things, because you may need to memorize all and each and every word in the text you copied, right? But if you can grab the concept into your mind, then you can write it with your own words, right? Then you do not need to worry about memorizing things. Otherwise, you have to memorize even at the exam, or you want sometimes they won't come to your mind at the exam time. So then you will be very uncomfortable. But if you refer the internet, it's okay. Refer and prepare your own answer, then you won't forget and you do not want to memorize that thing. Right? Okay. Then what are the advantages of DBMS? We have talked a little bit about that. What are the advantages of DBMS? I told you one, actually two. One thing, data manipulation language support and data dictionary. There can be other where you can find. So, what is your answer?
Provide data administration.
Yes. Again. Yeah. What are the actually administrative things in a DBMS? If you have any idea.
Manipulate data in search setting and make queries.
Yeah, that is making queries, and SQL related things are data manipulation language. You manipulate data using SQL. But the administrative tasks like creating backups, creating user accounts, right? Those type of things are basically administrative things. It is also supported by database management system. Right, then we move into the seventh question. What are the disadvantages in file processing system rather than using a database? And what if we do a file processing system? Still, in some occasions, we use files. Sometimes you may have referred log files. The file systems we need still. But apart from that, for different purposes, we use database management systems. If we store it in a file, then it would be definitely very time consuming and difficult for processing. The file processing systems are not actually capable of quick responses. You have to always write, read and write. It's a time consuming thing. What else you have written there?
Low integrity.
Yeah, integrity in the sense what do you mean by the integrity? Sometimes you may write the same thing in different places with different values. So you may not be able to properly locate the existing record and change the value. So you may result in many different problems after that, because when you retrieve the value, it can have many different values. Likewise, there are many advantages of using DBMS and databases rather than using file processing systems. Right, what is SQL?
Domain-specific language to use program and handle relational database. Using
The main idea of this is to do as a data manipulation. So once you have created tables to create statements, then retrieve statements and doing many updates, right? Those can be done using SQL, which is stand for Structured Query Language. But in Oracle, we use a different flavor called PL/SQL, Procedural Language SQL. Therefore, it is a bit different because it is having some programmable features as well. The features of programming language can also be found in PL/SQL. Anyhow, if you take only the structured query language, it supports for many databases, having the advantage of manipulating, creating databases. Right? If you search in the internet, you can find many things, many answers for the last one. What are the things SQL can do? All the things I described, if possible with SQL. Right? Querying, updating, creating, modifying, everything can be done using SQL. Now we go to the other section. We learn about the database with detail. As we know now, the database is a collection of raw data to a particular thing. Databases normally is a logical, coherent collection of data with some inherent meaning. That is why I told you when you register in the university system and when you register in the hospital, the coherent meaning is inherent meaning is different. You are treated as two different objects in the database. Their specific purpose is also then different. In in the university system, you are going to get education, and hospital system, you are supposed to get treatments. As I already discussed, you can have the telephone directory, TV guide. It's a typical databases which we can encounter in our day-to-day life. If you take the DBMS, as we already discussed, it's a collection of programs that enable users to create, maintain a database. Normally, as a general purpose software, it provides users with process of defining, constructing, and manipulating databases for various applications. That is why I told when you interact with databases, database admin can create backups and restore backups. They can create logins, manipulate logins. There can be a lot more administrative things is possible with DBMS. If you check the database system, database and DBMS together, we call a database system. Right? Then database system should have a database as well as database management system. Look at the advantages of DBMS in point form. You can control the redundancy using DBMS. Since you can create user accounts, you can restrict the unauthorized access, and you can provide multiple user interfaces. In a sense, it means for different user levels, you are giving only certain access restrictions. Right? For an example, only the lower level people can look at the data. They cannot modify. Right? Some level of users may create some record, but they may not be able to delete them. The superior level people would be able to create, update, delete whatever they want. They are granted to do privileges. Right? And as you told, the integrity constraints can be enforced using DBMS. And providing the backup and recovery, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, providing the backup as well as recovery. Database backup is very important. In the case of database failure, we can only survive with the backups. Right? Normally, in your day-to-day life, you may not be able, you may not have encountered such situations. But if you have your friends or relatives working in banks, you can ask them how important the backups are, right? Otherwise, if something lost, there may not be any chance to recover then after, right? Recover valuable data. In banks, if you talk in money, for database, it's just some figures, right? Some values, 1, 0, and some numbers, that's all, right? Database does not keep any money inside, only numbers. So if you lost that thing, the record, then there may be very difficult to recover that. Right, now if you go to the file processing system, as we discussed, the data redundancy and inconsistent. The one data in one place, you can find the same record with another set of data, right? Not consistent, not matching each other. And the other thing is it is difficult to accessing the data. If you look at a log file, then you will realize how difficult for you to read and understand. And the other thing is data is isolated. You can never link two log files and do a query like that. Right? Those are two independent files. If there are many files, let's say 100 files, you cannot build up any association or relationship in between. Right? I think it's very clear to you. If you open several notepad files, so you can do it as a small practical. You can open one notepad file and put some personal details, name, age, and so on of a particular students of your batch, and then you can open up another notepad and you can put some dummy values for the subjects and relevant marks. But when you want to write a query like how the student ID 1011 has scored, you cannot interlink those two notepad files and prepare a query out of that. Right? That data is isolated. And the other thing is, as you discussed, data integrity. Normally we call integrity constraints cannot be enforced to file processing systems. In databases we call integrity constraints. Those cannot be enforced using file systems. The other thing is concurrent access is not possible. Right? I think you can do again a small example. If you save some data on a notepad file, you can open it several times. Right? Several copies can be opened. Now let's say you save the notepad file, you double click on that, then it opens. Then you again double click on that, it again opens in a separate window. But you can manually edit two windows separately, and if you saved one would overwrite. Again, if you save the other one, then it overwrites the first one. Likewise, you cannot do concurrent access. None of the people can access this concurrently. It loses some data. The other thing is security problem. Only you can have file level security. So you are not able to provide higher level of security to file processing systems. Right. Then SQL, as I told you, it is structured query language which we use to communicate with our database. As stated by the American National Standard Institute, it is used as the standard language for relational database management system. But in Oracle, they use a separate, their own version called PLSQL. In there, you can't use this direct structured query language syntaxes. Anyhow, we learned that it could be very advantageous for you. Oracle is one of the leading database management systems in the industry. And once you graduated, you may join certain companies which their databases running on Oracle. If not, you may be getting some chance to work on Oracle database systems. Therefore, learning Oracle would be an added advantage. Right. And if you talk about types of data, there can be mainly two types of data, qualitative and quantitative. Normally, qualitative data are like feelings, like as I have given you, it was great fun. We cannot actually measure that, how much fun is. Quantitative data is given by figures, but it can be measured also. Anyhow, it can also be divided into two main categories. The first one is discrete, where you can explicitly say the amount, and the other thing is continuous. The continuous means it is very difficult to see the actual value. You can express with floating point numbers. I have asked one question out of this figure. So what would be the answer for this? What is your answer? If somebody asks a question like this, so can you figure it out and say the database or not? So you can justify your answer. It's better if everyone can go through this and identify, because it's better if you can identify it by yourself with the things we discussed. Since you all, I think all of you answered what is a database, then how can we identify a database, then you can come to your conclusion. If you are not certain, what about the answer for this one? Can we use Excel as a database? I'm asking whether we can use Excel as a database, not as a database system. Actually, we can. If you can quickly go through the text in my presentation, and if you can recall the things we discussed, we can use this as a database. But there are some disadvantages of using Excel. If you look at small organizations, small shops, they use Excel to record everything, their business transactions, and everything is recorded on Excel sheets. But there are many other tools like Microsoft Access provides small level database system, actually database management system, very primary level database management system for small piece of work, but still they use Excel. That is why I asked you to actually get the main concept into your mind. If you get the concept into your mind, you can easily answer. If you look at this Excel sheet, it is having a collection of information related to a particular inherent subject matter. So most probably they are having last name, first name, and their firm, staff, the other relevant details. So looking at, you can guess this is something like a staff employee registration system or employee details, right? So we can think of it as a database. Anyhow, there are some differences between Excel and type of databases we are planning to learn throughout this lecture series. I have listed down some disadvantages of using Excel as a database, even though some small level organizations still use that. One thing is, it's not easy to query data, and concurrent access. As I told you, it's again like a file, but you can implement relationships in between worksheets, not workbooks, right? In normally one Excel, we call, once you open the Excel, it opens as a book, right? We call it Excel book. With Excel book, you have many Excel worksheets. If you look at the organization of the Excel, so likewise, separate tables, you can create separate worksheets and create your tables there. Then you can come up with a database, and if you want to use Excel, there are many ways of linking the worksheets in between, right? There are formula you can link in between, but you cannot link among the workbooks. The other thing is, it is very difficult for you to handle large volume of data. You need a lot more time to search and find records in an Excel worksheet. If you look at the typical real world scenario, now you just assume you are inserting your ATM card to a teller machine. So I think you have experience in doing that. How long would it take actually to validate your PIN number? Does it take hours, days, weeks? How long does it take to identify you out of millions of clients? So, do you have any experience? Credit card validation. So if you take a credit card like HSBC, they are international. They are in international banking. Therefore, they have many millions of clients around the globe. So even at the instant you try to validate the credit card, it is validated within split seconds, right? It does not take much more time to validate. And you want to, if you want to check the balance, account balance, the credit limit, whatever, it is just a split second of time. Right? But you think the whole number of clients, the population, it's millions. Right? So you can think of how fast it happens. To do that, it has to go through the network and network traffic, and with everything, it gives the result within split seconds. Not only the access time to the traveling time of packets, everything together, it won't take actually time. So that type of things are difficult using Excel and file processing systems. I think it's clear to you. So I have given you one comparison what we have discussed. You can quickly go through what we have discussed is given in separate. It's a comparison where you can quickly go through this slide and try to understand. I would like to ask you one question regarding this database transactions. Have you ever experienced regarding this rollback thing? Have any one of you experienced regarding this rolling back a transaction? Actually, I have given you a situation where you can see the rollback thing happens, like a power failure. Now you just think you have typed your PIN number and check the account balance, and you are going to withdraw some money. Then at the last moment, there can be a power failure. Normally, ATMs are running for a few minutes with power backups, but anyhow, the system may sometimes malfunction before you retrieve the money. So it always keep on writing what the transaction is being happening in a log sheet. So if you have not withdrawn money at the last moment, so it will roll back and it will again credit the amount to your account. Otherwise, after you pressed OK for final verification, then your account has been deducted, right, with the money the value you entered. But it checks whether the transaction process completes. If it is partially complete, then it will roll back, right? There will not any partially completed transactions. The transaction has to be completed as a whole single unit. That is a property of transaction. So that type of things can only be done with databases. These are the last points regarding spreadsheets versus databases. You can quickly go through that. We will talk about the relational databases by next week. Do you have any questions, or we can wind up for today? So before that, do you have any questions regarding this?
So what are the examples for recovery tools for database?
Yeah, actually, in a database management system itself, sometimes we give you some recovery tools. Like, so if you look into administrative tools in database management systems, you can go to Microsoft SQL and go to administrative tools. There are ways of having backups. It's one way of recovering, as I told you. So if you are a database administrator, actually it is one of the duties to use administrative tools given in the database management system to maintain the database in a strong and robust manner. With that, they have different set of tools given. So Excel does not give you only your file is crashed. It can give you some one single recovery option. Once you started that program, it shows you your file could be recovered. It depends on what you have actually saved. But in database management systems, there are timely backups can be scheduled, and you can recover from that backup. So there are a lot more set of tools given in under administrative tools. You can just go to that. It depends on different database management systems. You can just search on the internet and find what are the features given in that particular language. If you are interested in learning that. Normally, we are not going to use third-party tools to recover database management systems. Rather than they give their own set of tools, it is duty of database administrator to use that tools and make their database in a strong and robust